right, so normally we do this and we talk about all the individual varieties, but we do that on a lot of different stops. You've had that opportunity to hear about that. If you have questions about varieties, we'd be happy to answer them. The Syngenta folks are here they could answer some questions about their varieties as well. But the focus here isn't really about selecting the varieties that you have available to you now. What we wanted to talk about was some of the things that we're trying to do, kind of going forward and thinking about how we want to approach breeding for wheat for Kansas into the future. So Romulo talked about losing about 2% of our acres every year to other crops. And some of that is wheat doesn't necessarily get credit for what it does for the corn or the soybean or the sorghum crop that follows wheat. So we kind of, I hate hearing the phrase #poverty grass, but I do hear #poverty grass. And so we think that wheat is a really important crop for us to have in the rotation. It does a lot of things for us, as Romulo's already outlined. So are there some things that we could do where we could create additional value and it would make more economic sense for wheat to stay in the rotation? So, the things that we could do there is we could massively increase yield. Maybe that's where hybrid wheat comes in, is higher productivity to be able to produce more bushels, and that changes that equation a little bit. We've been thinking about some other ways to approach it as well. So we wanted to kind of explore ways to create additional value for Kansas farmers. And it's not that this is going to be something where it's going to be on every farm. A lot of these things are going to fit, relatively small acreages, but the idea is that you pull out things out of commodity class production, and eventually you start to pull a little bit out here, a little bit out there, and you reduce what's available from commodity class wheat, and you start to change supply and demand, and you float all boats, and then you still have the premium for those quality things or value add things on top of the base price. So what are some of the things that we've been talking about doing? And they're all at various stages of coming to fruition. Some of them are kind of at the beginning stage of commercialization. Some of them are established, but we're trying to figure out new ways of doing it. And then others are things that we're just thinking about, how do we go from here, and can we use some of these traits to create added value for Kansas farmers? So when I first got to K-State in 2000, I inherited a very small set of winter durum varieties, mostly from Eastern Europe, and we just started messing around with those. And so we had them in Southwest Kansas, and it's like, well, okay, there's a lot of things wrong here. They don't have very good winter hardiness. They're really, really late. The quality isn't very good, and they don't yield very much. So probably somebody smarter would have said, okay, let's not do this. But we said, all right, well, there's a lot of problems, but can we work with this? So 2 years ago, we released our first winter durum variety. It's not going to be adapted for this area. It's adapted for Western Kansas. But again, the idea is if we could take 100,000 acres of wheat acreage out of Western Kansas, then that's that many bushels of common wheat that are not in the supply chain. So, and so why winter durum? Why was that something we were thinking about? One is that while it's still a commodity, it's not traded on the Board of Trade, but on average, durum's worth about $1 a bushel more than common wheat. The other advantage to it is you plant it the same way, you harvest it the same way. There's maybe some nuances with how your combine's set, maybe some slight nuances in your fertility management because you have to hit 13% protein in order to retain the value. But by and large, it doesn't require our producers to make an additional investment in equipment or other things in order to be able to grow it. So we're at the point where we have about 900 acres of durum. Most of it is in Scott County this year. Looking at growing that to about 5,000 acres next year. So again, a little bit of a value play over common wheat. And then also, most of our durum is either grown in the desert Southwest in Arizona, California. Most of that's in rotation with lettuce and a lot of your vegetable crops. But it doesn't seem particularly sustainable given competition for water in the desert Southwest to put water on durum wheat. And so we think that acreage probably will eventually go away. And then in the north central U.S., Montana, North Dakota, into the Canadian Prairie provinces is the other major durum producing area, and they often struggle with scab. So Kelsey talked a lot about scab. That's an issue on durum. Western Kansas doesn't have so much of an issue. So we thought we had an opportunity putting it in a different geography, aiming for about 5,000 acres next year. We'll see where it goes from there. Winland Foods is a pasta company They're actually the largest pasta company in the U.S. They have a pasta plant at Excelsior Springs, Missouri, just north of Kansas City. They have 7 other plants, and so we're working with a company called Farm Strategy. It's a small company, Kansas-based company, that's working with elevators to aggregate and segregate the grain and then be able to get that transported to the end user. In this case, that's been Winland Food. They've been really good about standing up the program and helping us get a start with our producers and making sure their contracts so growers know what they're going to get when they put the seed in the ground. So we're excited about that. We're kind of at a critical stage here. I think the next 3 years will really tell whether we start to take off on the winter durum or if it kind of fades away. Not really going to come back into this area of the state. Some things we need to have on winter durum. I said the 13% protein, but we also need hard vitreous kernels. So whenever we have weathering events, rain and moisture during harvest, that damages that. And the durums are a white wheat, so we have some of those sprout issues. So it's a Western Kansas thing. So that's more of an FYI, but again, it has the potential to take acreage out of common wheat production and reduce the supply of commodity class common wheat. So what else could we do? And it's been around for a while, is the idea of this super strong wheat. You may have heard of the variety Snowmass out of Colorado. It's been tied to Ardent Mills. They have a contract with Colorado State, so they have exclusivity on the Snowmass program from Colorado State. What that is a wheat that has very, very strong gluten. So when we talk about quality characteristics, kind of the language that the milling and baking industry uses is called the farinograph. And I'm not going to explain the farinograph other than just it's a mixing bowl with some pins in it, and it kind of measures the force that's required when you're mixing it, all that sort of stuff. The characteristics they're really interested in a farinograph are absorption. So how much water does that flour hold? So part of that is, if you're a baker, your cheapest ingredient is water, so that the more water that flour carries, the more that 1 pound loaf of bread is actually water and not some of your other more expensive ingredients. Beyond that, water is actually a really critical component for product quality. That's especially true as you move into things like refrigerated doughs and frozen doughs, so that ability to retain extra water becomes really important. So Snowmass has a high water absorption characteristic. It also has very long stability, and so most of our Kansas wheats that we would grow would have somewhere between like a 7 and a 15-minute farinograph stability. So something like Everest would be on the short end of that 7, maybe aspires to 7 minutes, whereas something like Manya would probably be at 15, 16, 17-minute stability. What that stability really is just telling you is how long can you mix that dough before it starts to break down. So if you're thinking about a bakery and something goes wrong on the bake line and you got dough in the mixer, how long can it mix in that mixer until it starts to turn basically to goo, and then you basically lose that. And so that also affects product quality as well. So on average, we're probably about a 10, 11 minute farinograph stability for hard winter wheat. The Snowmass would have farinograph stabilities of 50, 60, 70 minutes. So very, very strong gluten. It's not a new trait. The source that we actually have used genetically is Red River 68. It's a spring wheat for the Red River Valley in North Dakota, and 68 means what you think it does. It was released in 1968, so it's not exactly a new characteristic. It's been around for a while. This was kind of the foundation of the Canadian Super Strong class, but we're starting to think about how do we use this more directly. A lot of that comes from bakeries over the years have used additives and other things into their mixes in order to achieve the product quality that they want. So you need a certain loaf volume so that when you go buy a loaf of bread off the shelf, that loaf of bread actually fills out that package and it doesn't look like there's way more package than bread, or things like that. So so as we start to think about that, these can actually have really valuable characteristics. So working with Farm Strategy, we're coordinating and collaborating with Oklahoma State University some on this. They've released a series of varieties that are Gallagher back crosses with Snowmass. Paradox, Firebox, Breadbox, and Paradox are the 4 that they've released. Ox is just strong as an ox, so very strong gluten. But when you start to use these things, you can actually add this flour into baking mix at really pretty low concentrations of like 2% super strong flour, and you start to get the effect of replacing those additives and things that the baking industry wants to move away from, and from a regulatory standpoint has to move away from. And so this becomes something where the label says flour, not any additive or anything like that, and you get the same benefit. You get the same product benefit, quality benefits. And so there's a program that's been growing, mostly with the Oklahoma varieties to this point, taking advantage of that characteristic with farm strategy. Gorongzong at Hayes released a variety called KS Snow Fox last year. It has that characteristic, and so that'll be in the farm strategy program as well. That's a white wheat, so probably not a great choice for this area of the state. But we are continuing to work with that trait. We have some lines on our preliminary trials that almost certainly have that trait. We also have it back crossed and have some Mako derivatives that have that extra strong trait, and to be able to bring that in. So it's going to be a closed loop system. This is one of those things where this is great in small quantities and blending it in at 2%. If you were to use that flour at 100%, you'll probably burn up your mixer, because dough's going to be so strong it's just going to stall your mixer. So you don't really want to have it. This really can't be something that's out there in purely concentrated forms that will really screw up the quality industry and create issues. And so it needs to be in a closed loop system in order to take advantage of it. But it really moves us toward things that are clean label, have value to the industry. What we're excited about in working with Farm Strategy, the CEO is Andrew Holscher, grew up at Bushton, Kansas. His dad farms wheat. They're very committed to the value needs to be shared with producers. That's probably been one of my biggest frustrations throughout my career. Is I've gotten fussed at a lot by the Wheat Quality Council for some of the things that I've released, and it's like, well, when you give the farmer an economic signal that they can act on prior to planting, then come and talk to me and we'll deal with that. Otherwise, you're kind of just complaining about getting something for free, and I'm not probably terribly concerned about that. So we need to hit a certain quality. Beyond that, I think that the quality industry has not been real good about rewarding farmers for the quality that they have produced in the past, and that they've actually accrued that value. Some of that is they're essentially grain traders, not more than millers, that are making their money off of grain trade, not off of milling, which is some of the reason behind that. But we think these sort of programs are really helpful because there is a component there where there is a significant premium that is paid to the producer.